Hi there. Imagine, if you will, that you're walking through a forest. You're looking where you're going, paying attention, and then suddenly you're grabbed by huge raptorial arms, snatched in close to the body of whatever it is that has snagged you, and then slowly but surely eaten to death, bite by bite. I am here today with what would be, if we were smaller, possibly the most terrifying animal in the world. And that is the praying mantis. But thank goodness we're a lot bigger than praying mantises are. And as a result, what I have here is possibly the coolest insect in the entire world. These guys are amazing. They've always been among my favorite animals, full stop. And I'm really grateful that I get to share them with you guys today. Some of the things I love about them, and there's so much. One of them is that they're a very visual predator. And as a very visual species ourselves, I think there's something that we appreciate about that. You know, it's almost easier to empathize and see the world the way they see it. You know, when I see my dog sniffing around, I know that his sense of smell is so powerful that, you know, he's experiencing a completely different world than I am. The praying mantis seems like it's observing exactly the same world that I am, and it's thinking about that world in at least as much detail as I am. It seems that way. They might be aliens. I can't be sure, but they definitely have that appearance to them. Very, very thoughtful, very, very alert, and if you're small, very, very terrifying. They've got these awesome raptorial arms, so in addition to having a head that moves around and makes it look like they are taking everything in, they also grab things, very much like we do. They've got 4 legs for walking, and those front 2 legs are for grasping mostly, though they will use them to walk around a little bit as well. They're mostly for grasping their prey. And once they grasp their prey, they have the most heinous way of dispatching their prey, I think, of any animal there is. There are a lot of animals that will suffocate their prey or stop the blood from moving or inject venoms, something to dispatch the prey. Oh no, that is not the case with the praying mantis. The praying mantis, much like Dr. Grant hypothesized the velociraptors would do in Jurassic Park, you're still alive when they begin to eat you. In fact, you're still alive when they're about halfway done eating you. It's the worst. The only really kind thing they do is they usually seem to start with the head, which for you would end things fairly quickly. For a lot of their prey, though, they keep going for a long time even after that head is eaten off. And that is actually true even for male praying mantises, which is actually kind of fortunate for them. You may know this about praying mantises, but they are keen to eat their own kind. They eat anything that moves that they can grab and eat alive, and that includes male praying mantises. Females tend to be considerably larger than males, and so that means that males tend to be the victims of cannibalism when cannibalism occurs. A male praying mantis might avoid this fate by simply avoiding females. Unfortunately, selection has favored males that don't avoid females, because the ones that didn't reproduce very much. And approaching a female is a very, very dangerous game. Now, there are about 3 ways that this game could end. One of them is that you could walk up to her and she could eat you. That's the worst. Another way that this could go is you could walk up to her and mate with her and then get eaten. And the third way is that you could mate with her and get the heck out of there. And that is what the male is always going to try to do. But the female is playing a very different game, because it's good for her if she gets to mate and if she gets a meal. And one little insurance policy that they sometimes employ when the opportunity presents itself is to eat the first part of the male, like the head, enough so that there's no reason for him to run along after the deed is done, and then to allow his decapitated corpse, well, not really corpse, his decapitated animate zombie body, to go ahead and mate with you, and then finish him off after the deed is done. Because praying mantises are the scariest animals in the world. They are, however, if you are not anywhere close to the size of a praying mantis, Beautiful, beautiful animals. These that I have with me today are European mantises. They come in several different color morphs that I've seen, and I'd really like to understand the genetics of praying mantis coloration. The ones that I tend to see around here range from browns and tans all the way to dull greens and bright greens, though there are other species of mantids that are bright pink and just all kinds of colors. Praying mantises are amazingly beautiful animals. I've never seen an ugly mantis. I've seen some that are very, very cryptic. In fact, they're all very, very cryptic, but some of them are cryptic on very, very conspicuous and beautiful things like flowers, and so they end up unbelievably gorgeous. All of them look like space aliens, though. They've all got that in common. And the truth is about the praying mantis that, given the fact that we're much bigger than they are, they can actually make really excellent pets. And so today, we want to try to figure out if the praying mantis is the right pet insect for you. To figure this out, did you see those groovy wings? To help you figure this out, we have broken down the praying mantis, look at those cool wings show off, into our 5 categories, which are handleability, care, hardiness, availability, and upfront costs. When it comes to handleability, we give the praying mantis a score of 4 out of 5. Really, they are exceptionally easy to handle. Even though I've most of my life found them a little bit intimidating, I know my kids still find them a little bit scary to handle. Because what they do to other animals is terrifying, they're very, very uninclined to try to bite you or anything like that. Really, there are only 2 problems with handling praying mantises. One of them is just that they're small and relatively fragile. It means you can let them walk on you, but don't try to grab them, and definitely be very, very careful with what you're doing so that you don't accidentally crush them to death, because that is a real possibility when handling something this small and fragile. I mean, it's still just a little insect. The other problem is, and they'll demonstrate this a little bit, they can fly. They're not great flyers, and they can only fly as adults because only the adults have wings, but they are capable of some flight, and I've actually seen them go probably, 20 meters or so in a flight, though most of the time, as you'll see here, they're just gonna use their wings to fly down to the table, sort of like Buzz Lightyear. They're just falling with style. However, generally speaking, they're just great. They're really great to handle as long as you don't squish them. And like I said, only the adults have wings. Praying mantises are what are called hemimetabolous insects. They're 2 big groups of insects, and we actually discussed this in our video on 5 of the best insect feeders. But there are 2 big groups of insects, one of them being the hemimetabolous insects, those that have incomplete metamorphosis, which means they start out life essentially looking like the adults, and when praying mantises come out of the ootheca, which is that weird kind of almost sponge-looking egg sac that they deposit, when they come out of the ootheca, they already look like tiny little praying mantises, and they operate just like tiny little praying mantises. They're already little horror shows. And the only major difference between them and the adults that you would see is just that they don't have any wings. And they go through a number of molts, each one called an instar. Nice job showing off your groovy wings. And so they'll get bigger and bigger and bigger every time they shed their exoskeleton. And only on their final molt, what's called their terminal molt, will they molt out and have wings. And this is different from the holometabolous insects, which have a complete metamorphosis. These are like beetles and butterflies and things like that look absolutely nothing like adults when they're juveniles. Praying mantises, whenever you get them, they already look and act like praying mantises, which is hardcore and rad. To finish off handling, really the main thing about them is they're just gonna stand on you and they're gonna walk around on you, and that is how you interact with a praying mantis. And if you ask me, it's darn fun. In fact, this one was a volunteer. I was out on a walk with my kids and we found this mantis, and I put her on my shoulder and she just stayed up there all the way until we got home. And now I have a groovy brown European mantis to show you, just like the green one that we already had. pretty cool. When it comes to care, we give the praying mantis a score of 4 out of 5. The enclosure that you'll need for a praying mantis is actually really similar to the one that we built for mourning geckos. You might want to decorate it a little bit differently, you know, maybe not do the plant, do more sticks. But if you watch that video, in fact, we'll put a link right there, that shows a really great enclosure that you could build. And it's very inexpensive as well. They're going to eat relatively small numbers of insects. As juveniles, you know, if you get a baby mantis, they're going to need really, really small feeders, maybe something like fruit flies. And you'll be feeding them fairly frequently. Though when they get to be adults, actually, one of the issues that you can run into is overfeeding them. And so you only need to feed them every few days. And it's kind of terrific because it's really clear when they need fed. Their abdomens will swell quite large. They've got three body segments, like all insects. And so the front one is the head. And then the one that the legs come off of, that's the thorax. And then in the back, there's the abdomen. And so the abdomen will swell up really large when they're full, and they're good eaters. So, and it's also really, really fun to feed them. So it gets tempting to overfeed them, but that can actually be very detrimental to their health. So it's really important, keep an eye on that abdomen. When it's swollen, don't feed them for a while. And then when that abdomen starts to get kind of small, it's feeding time. And things like crickets make really great feeders for these guys. If you're gonna feed them things like superworms or mealworms or dubia roaches, things that tend to burrow into the substrate and hide, I'd recommend only doing that from feeding tongs, because the truth is, even if you release them into the enclosure, the mantis will probably never find them. Crickets, one of the great things about crickets is they tend to like to explore, and oftentimes as a feeder, that backfires on you just terribly. They will require some misting, especially if you notice that they're getting ready to molt or shed their exoskeleton. This is something that you're only going to see with the subadults. And they'll start to hang upside down, and they won't be feeding for a couple of days, and that'll indicate to you they're about to molt. And that's actually one of the times when it's easiest to lose a mantis. So you're going to need to make sure that you keep the humidity up so they can get out of their molt really well and they're well hydrated. But generally speaking, misting and the occasional feeding are really the only care that a mantis needs. Also clean up after them a little bit, but they're not a very messy animal. They also don't need any special heat or lighting, that is, unless you keep your house very cold. Generally speaking, right around the temperature where you feel comfortable, they feel comfortable as well. Their care is actually really similar to a lot of the geckos that you can keep at room temperature. You know, just a few insects every now and then, a little bit of misting, and that's pretty much it. Like we did mention though, they do need some special care around molting. Mostly you just need to make sure they've got good perches from which they can hang, and that humidity's up a little bit. Another thing about the care for these guys is, you know, even if you get one as a juvenile, their whole life cycle lasts about a year. And so you're not committing to doing this care for very long, but longer than a lot of insects. And so that's kind of fun. And I'd like to take just a moment to actually give a little bit of time to one of our patrons from Patreon. And just to point out that this is one of the perks of being a patron on Patreon, is you might get to show up in one of our videos, like this one.
Hey everyone, name's Ed, and this is Neptune, my jeweled lacerda. The reason why I have Neptune out here today is because, well, believe it or not, if it wasn't for Clint's Reptiles, I would have never known what he was, let alone want him. And I couldn't be happier with him. But he's exactly the reason why I supported Clint on Patreon. You know, Clint does an excellent job in providing you with the right information and useful information for you to make an educated decision on what reptile is right for you. And I just want him to keep doing that and, you know, keep helping people and making those right decisions, you know. Too often you see a lot of people make uneducated decisions and buy things like iguanas or savanna monitors, and, you know, they don't really know what they're getting themselves into. And that's why I appreciate the work that Clint Reptiles does. You know, part of being a patron, the thing I enjoy the most is probably the podcast. Some of the discussions and conversations they have on that podcast are quite interesting to deal with. As you can see, he is a handful, and once he's out of his enclosure for too long. But like I said, being a patron, I couldn't be happier with the content he puts out. Even the early access is great. You know, and that's why I suggest, you know, a lot of people should become patrons, because his channel will continue to grow and he'll continue to put out some great content out there. And I'm excited to see what else he can do. All right, well, Peace out. Say bye, Neptune.
This video is amazing! When it comes to hardiness, we give the praying mantis a score of 3 out of 5. We've already spoken about this a lot, but molting is definitely the most dangerous time for a mantis, and so as they're growing up, that is the time that you're most likely to lose a praying mantis. Do your best with the perches and the humidity, and they'll probably do just fine. Avoid things like overfeeding them or feeding them dangerous prey. You know, sometimes people like to have like little gladiator battles with a praying mantis against something comparably terrifying, and your praying mantis won't last very long if you do that. Sometimes you don't even realize how dangerous an animal is, but you know, things like crickets and beetles especially, they can be very, very dangerous. So, you know, definitely give them feeders that they're going to defeat. And just be sure also with your misting that you're not misting so much that it's staying really wet in the enclosure. Make sure there's adequate ventilation and that it's drying out some between mistings. Raising juveniles is going to be the most difficult. Adults are going to be considerably hardier, though they're not going to live that many more months. So if you want one that lasts closer to a year, you're probably going to need to start with a younger mantis. But with proper care, they really should last a long time, at least for an insect. When it comes to availability, we give the praying mantis a score of 3 out of 5. They are actually pretty widely available online. Sometimes you'll see them at things like reptile expos. Very rarely in pet stores, but I have seen them in pet stores before. But in a lot of cases, they're actually prohibited. Here where I live, in fact, you're only allowed to have 2 different species, and those are the 2 species that are already well established in the state, being the Chinese mantis and the European mantis, which they're both introduced, but they're trying to prevent more being introduced into the state, and so they're highly restricted. Some states are like that, others are not. Usually it just depends on if you live in a state where praying mantises could become established. In a lot of cases, you know, even if you're not allowed to buy one, they are out in your yard, right? I didn't have to wander very far from home to come across these 2 praying mantises. It was a nice couple of strolls with my kids, and we had some mantises to show you, and the kids have actually been having a really great time with them and learning a lot of responsibility in kind of a low stakes way, and that's awesome. When it comes to upfront costs, we give the praying mantis a score of 5 out of 5. Even the most expensive of the mantises are relatively affordable. I mean, not year for year, because a lot of the most expensive mantises will live less than a year and they cost over $100, but a lot of mantises are free or very nearly free even if you buy one captive bred. That's awesome. The enclosures, as we've already described, are not expensive to build. You know, we recommend it be at least probably 3 times as tall and as wide as the mantis is long. And once again, we've got a good tutorial on how to do that in our Mourning Gecko video, so I strongly recommend you check it out. We'll have a link to that down in the description, along with all the things that you would need to keep a mantis. I mean, except for the jumping spider, which, I mean, that is basically an animal that you can keep for free. This is about as cheap as it's really going to get. Even the long-term costs of, you know, feeding them and whatnot aren't going to be that major because they don't actually even live that long. So this is about as minor of a commitment as you can get, other than getting a jumping spider, which are totally rad. I strongly recommend it. And for these reasons, we give the praying mantis an overall score of 3.8 out of 5. And that's a darn good score for an insect. To be honest, I probably like insects just about as well as I like reptiles, which is a heck of a lot. But most insects don't make very good pets. It's just hard to keep them alive for very long. The praying mantis, however, you know, it's one of the coolest insects in the world, and it actually makes a darn good pet, which makes it even cooler still. That said, it's still not a pet that will be with you all that long. And that is why, generally speaking, I like reptiles as pets better than insects, even though I think insects are amazing and they're a wonderful thing, and I'm so excited that I can go out just, you know, a block from my house and see 20 different species. Insects are special, and I don't know if they get any more special than the praying mantis. But if what you want is essentially a tiny alien that lives about a year, eats its prey alive and the heads off of its mates before they mate, then the praying mantis might be the perfect pet insect for you. And if you want something that lives a lot longer than that, you might want to check out the lists upon lists of stinking rad reptiles that we cover on this channel. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon.
I am ready for some check.
Did you see that? They can fly. You're being so cool. How cool are you? You're so cool. That's the answer. Clean her foot real quick. Do you see the way she's holding her leg with one of her raptorial arms? That sort of use of... They scream intelligence even if they're not. Oh, you're so cool.
Thanks, Clint. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm too close.
You'll never film me.
You'll never film me.
No more paparazzi.
Go away. Go away. Go. You're not welcome here. I am a European mantis. I say get out. Or I'll eat you like I ate my late husband.
Gosh.
Husband or
Lover?
Really, they are exceptional at little. Oh, the horror. Oh yeah, eat the head from back door. This is the perfect video for Halloween.
Oh, the horror!
Yeah, it's horrible and graphic, and she's about to wear a cricket's head as a mask. It's oh, a nightmare.
It's terrible.
And yet here we are.
No living crickets were harmed in the making of this video.
Yeah, which is true.
Oh, it severed it.
It's wearing the mask
Eating
now.
its brains. Ooh.
In your head. In your head.
Oh, terrible. That is so disturbing.
Yeah.
I can't show this.